Hello BookTube, this is Weekly Reads. My plan for this reading week was to bail redeem The Golden Road by William Dalrymple. That plan failed, and I will talk about the failure a little later in this video. But first I'm going to talk about the 5 volumes of poetry that I read over the course of this reading week. Starting with Sonic Peace by Kiriu Minashita, translated from the Japanese by Araki, Hyett, and Spencer Thurlow. I read this collection on Friday, and I rather liked it. Most of the poems or the most notable poems in this collection are about the environment and technology. The collection features both the English translation as well as the Japanese original. Minashita has written 2 volumes of poetry, both in the 2000s. This collection itself is her first and is 20 years old. It was translated into English in, I think, 2017. And really good. I quite enjoyed it. On Sunday, I read 2 collections by David Trinidad. Plasticville, which is from the early 2000s and is a reread. I had a different version of this collection about 20 years ago. And his most recent collection, the new playlist. I really enjoyed both of these collections quite a bit. Returning to Plasticville after a long time was like visiting an old friend. And New Playlist was showing that he hasn't lost a step. Most of the poems in this collection are thematically centered on pop culture and memories of childhood. And they're quite enjoyable. On Monday, I reread The Memory of Gills by Catherine W. Carter. This is her debut collection, as far as I know. And a lot of Catherine W. Carter's work in this collection as well is centered on the environment and, well, with a decided pagan sensibility. Whether it's a actively religious sensibility or a more creative inspiration, I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I really enjoyed this collection, as I do all of Catherine W. Carter's work. She is one of my favorite living poets. And yesterday, Thursday, I reread What Work Is by Philip Levine. This is a collection of poems from 1991 that won the National Book Award. So these poems are about work, the working class, memories of a working class childhood, and they're quite good. Some of the poems maybe were a little bit too long, and particularly the long poem Burnt might have lost the thread of what Levine was trying to do at some point. But for the most part, I quite liked this collection as well, although I didn't love it as much as I did the first time I read it. So that's the poetry. So, back to The Golden Road by William Dalrymple, which I attempted to bail redeem on Saturday. And then if things had been successful, I would have kept with it until I finished it. But things were not successful. So for those of you who don't know, I bail a ridiculous amount, which is my term for not finishing a book. I am very difficult to please, and if a book is starting to displease me, I am very quick to put it aside and not come back to it. Although sometimes it nags at me, and I will give a second or third or sometimes more than that attempts to read a book that I have previously not finished. And those I call bail redemptions. Sometimes I succeed at that, and sometimes I don't. And this time I did not. So, The Golden Road is a history of India's central place in global commerce for almost 1500 years. From the 3rd century BCE to the 13th century CE or BC, AD, however the hell you want to put those designators after the numbers. Anyway, so during this time period, Indian trade goods, religions, scientific knowledge, philosophy, culture spread across the world. And this was helped by maritime trade routes. For half the year, the winds blow east to west. And then the other half of the year, they blow west to east across the Indian subcontinent. So that allows for trading missions to basically go on a year-long cruise east to west and then west to east. Yeah, you get the idea. And so I thought initially when I read the description that this would be an interesting book. And I've been really wanting to read histories of India that are not set in or about the British Raj. And unfortunately, this book does not work for me. I build on it in roughly the same place I build on it the first time, which is 10 pages into the first chapter. So the first chapter begins with the discovery in 1819 of a series of artificial caves in which murals were painted depicting court life in that part of India in the early 1st century BC, BCE, again, however you want to put it. And so overall the chapter is about Buddhism, and Buddhism, the beginning of Buddhism spread across the Near East and into the Roman Empire and into Southeast Asia and North Asia. But anyway, so the first 10 pages of this chapter is largely about these murals. And it comes off as more of like an introductory tangent than anything else. And it bugs me because it doesn't go anywhere. And I think that coupled with the introduction, which also annoyed me, led to me having very little patience to continue on with the book. So this history, India's central place in global commerce for nearly 1500 years, is one that you could describe as a forgotten history or a suppressed history. And that part of the introduction, part of the reasoning for this book is to bring this history back to light. And there's often a bit of a antagonism with these kind of histories, as there is with, like, if you're reading a literary study, very often there's previous scholars have gotten this all wrong, and my version is how it's going to work out. That kind of antagonism. which, depending on the tone, can be quite off-putting, particularly for me. So that all bugged me and contributed to me bailing. I was also starting to think, well, given that Dalrymple's work mostly seems to be about the Raj, that maybe there's an unfamiliarity with this subject, and that there's maybe a tonal issue, a stylistic issue, maybe he being unfamiliar with this subject, that maybe something's a bit off with the presentation. So I decided on Tuesday to look at the Anarchy by William Dalrymple. This is a history of the British East India Company and its ruthless conquest and exploitation of India. And I read the introduction and part of the first chapter, and while this history is a bit more narrative than the Golden Road was, which could be more sources and also tighter narrative than what the Golden Road would have. But again, there was something about this book that also really bugged me. And so I'm thinking, I think maybe it's just Dalrymple's style just does not connect with me. And I think that could be the issue. So, yeah, that was a bummer. Now, as I was thinking about trying out the Anarchy and seeing if my idea was right, which, really I would have to actually read most of Dalrymple's work, but that ain't going to happen. I decided maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday I could do a try a chapter tag for some history, because right now I'm not terribly interested in history, I think. And so I tried to do a try chapter for Tudor England by Lucy Wooding. So this is a history of England under the Tudors, which was a dynasty that ruled England from 1485 to 1603 and comprised 3 generations of monarchs: Henry VII, his son Henry VIII, and Henry VIII's children, and Henry VII's grandchildren, Edward VI, Mary I, and Elizabeth I. Now, the introduction of this book is incredibly off-putting. Wooding tries to problematize, well, not that one isn't. She tries to question, to challenge, to disrupt what we know of this period. And she tries to, I guess, deconstruct it and then reconstruct it. But the problem is that her reconstruction is basically what she was deconstructing in the first place. So I'm not entirely sure what the point of it was. And then in the book itself, while there are chapters on the various reigns of the monarchs, there are also chapters about various subjects. The first chapter is about England itself, so an overview of the geography and that sort of thing. And I just wasn't all that interested. So I decided to abandon the triad chapter for what history I have in my collection, and instead went and reread What Work Is yesterday. So while I enjoyed the poetry, I am a bit bummed that the history didn't work out for me as much as I would have liked. But anyway, So that leads me to what I will be reading this coming reading week. So the first part of this coming reading week will be devoted to manga, and the later part of this reading week will also be devoted to manga. Although that part I will talk about in my October reading plans, because the last 3 days of this reading week will be October. So today I'm going to be reading Volume 3 of Still Ball Run by Hirohiko Araki. This is part of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and is about a horse race, cross-country horse race from San Diego, California to New York City, New York. The main character is a former jockey named Jonathan Joestar, who over the course of the race develops a superpower called a stand. Several other racers also begin to develop stand abilities, and things go to zany hell, as is the wont for JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I've been enjoying the series so far, and I'm looking forward to this third volume. And tomorrow I will be reading volumes 58, 59, and 60 of One Piece by Eiichiro Oda in this 3-volume omnibus edition. One Piece is one of the most popular manga series in the world. It's about a young man named Monkey D. Luffy who, when he was a child, was a mascot for a crew of pirates captained by red-haired Shanks. On the penultimate visit of the red-haired pirates to Luffy's hometown, Luffy ate a devil fruit, a fruit that grants its consumer superhuman abilities. In Luffy's case, he becomes a rubber man. 10 years later, Luffy leaves his hometown to become a pirate. He has the ambition to not only become a pirate, but find the One Piece and become king of the pirates. And so he, at the beginning of the series, goes out to build a crew and get a ship. So the Paramount War, which these volumes are centered on, is an arc in which the Straw Hats, Luffy's pirate crew, have been separated. And while Luffy initially planned to return to the Sapaloti archipelago to reunite with the crew, he discovers that his adoptive brother Ace has been captured by the world government and is set to be publicly executed. Ace was a higher-ranking commander for the Whitebeard Pirates, one of the strongest pirate fleets in the setting. And the world government's Marines decide that it would make sense for them to stage Ace's public execution to lure Whitebeard into a trap. Luffy decides to intervene and initially seeks to rescue his brother from the prison and pull down by raiding the prison. However, that doesn't work out, and Luffy and the prisoners that he did help escape instead head to Marine headquarters, where a massive battle is ongoing between the Whitebeard Pirates and the world government. And this volume sees a continuation of that arc. So I don't know quite what I'm going to read Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. I know I don't want to read manga. I want to give myself a little bit of a breather between Still Ball Run and One Piece and Demon Slayer, which I'll be starting October 1st. So I don't know if I'm going to read some more poetry, if I might try some fiction. I'm not entirely sure. I think what I might do is, after I finish with this video and I'm uploading it, I put all of the books away that I talked about. I'm going to go ahead and start building my October reading plan, except for all 23 volumes of Demon Slayer. They will remain on their bookcase, but the books in this room that I will be reading for my reading plan, I will be putting over here on this bookcase. And I think I'm going to add some alternates, and maybe some of those alternates will be read for like Sunday and then Monday and Tuesday. But however things work out, I will report back on Friday with what I ended up choosing to read. So next weekly reads will be a bit truncated because it'll be Still Ball Run, One Piece, whatever I choose to read Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. And then sometime the following week, I will talk about Demon Slayer. And then that forthcoming weekly reads will be whatever I end up reading after Demon Slayer. I have a plan for October, for Victober. But I'm going to also build up some alternates as well. So I will talk a lot more about that on Monday when I do my October reading plan. So, anyway, BookTube, that's all I got for now. Thank you. Have a great afternoon and evening, and have a great weekend. And I will see you Monday of next week. So until then, thank you and stay safe.